Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Nick from ASAPP, and we're joined here with Chance from PTP. We'll give more detailed introductions later, but I'll just get started with some of the housekeeping items to get those out of the way. Um, Chance and I will be advancing the slides automatically, so you don't need to do that. Uh, if there is any questions, though, you should know there's a Q&A box, and we'll be looking through that throughout the webinar. Anything that we can answer in real time, we will try to answer in real time, either verbally or via chat, and anything that might require a longer answer, we'll respond to later in email, and we'll send those out to you. So please be sure to ask questions as simple or as complicated as you like, and we'll get back to you on that. All right, with that housekeeping stuff done, I'll get started with just what are we talking about, right? What do we mean when we say you can transform interactions in the contact center with generative agent? For me, we have highly capable AI agents that can interact with customers directly and do most of the work of a tier 1 agent. That's how I like to summarize it. There's a lot of other pieces to it, and that's what we're going to get into. Again, I'm Nick Molina. I head up product marketing here at ASAPP. My view of that is understanding customer needs and aligning how we show and talk about that and the product value and how it aligns with those needs. I also want to give you a little bit about ASAPP, right? You may not know who ASAPP is. We have 10 years of experience deploying AI in the call center. Most of our history, we actually did focus on augmenting agents. We always wanted to do full automation. We just thought the technology was not there. And the reason that we're here talking to you today is we think about a year ago or more, the technology got there. We were able to put it into a great product. And we're excited to show you how the technology can help you seize opportunities and examples of how other companies have done it and how it flexes across industries. We work with a great partner in PTP that's helped us in implementing this and getting into some of the details. Work with Chance quite a lot. So I'll give Chance a moment to introduce himself and give some background on PTP as well.
Thanks, Nick. I'm Chance Whitley. I am the principal AI CX consultant with the PTP. I've been in the contact center space for about 15 plus years. I like to tell people I was born in a contact center. Most recently, in the last few years, my specific focus in contact center has been around interaction automation. So how to better the self-service components of our contact centers. But being as part of PTP, we're a professional services company that has been around for more than 20 years. We've been specializing in innovative self-service solutions for contact centers. And all of the clients we work for, we're considered to be their trusted clients. And we have a privilege of being able to partner with ASAPP for generative agents. So with that said, let's go ahead and let's look at the agenda for today's session and see what we're about to get ourselves into. So as we go through the content, as Nick mentioned, feel free to ask questions as we go through using the QA panel. But today we're going to go through what we call a general understanding of generative agent, right? So let's understand how they reason, make decisions autonomously, what the opportunities are for interaction automation versus leveraging for agent assistance. And then we're going to do an overview of the generative agent technology. So we're going to look a little bit about how it reasons, takes actions, communicates directly with customers. And then we're going to discuss some of the impacts and benefits of our early adopters and the experience that we have created with the generative agent. So now with Nick, let's go ahead and look a little bit. Let's look at some of the things that generative agent can do so that as we proceed, people get a better frame or understanding of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's a lot that we're going to cover today. I found that it's helpful to ground people in just like a quick video on like, what is it and what does it do? And then we'll get into like, how do we make it happen and how do we make it really secure and built for enterprise. So we have this 1-minute video and then we'll get right back to you.
Chatbots scale well and solve poorly. Meet Generative Agent. Not a chatbot, an agent that speaks flexibly over voice or chat, acts on behalf of the customer, and reaches out to a human when necessary. Watch it work.
Hey, I noticed an incorrect transaction on my statement. Can you help?
Sure, I'll need to verify your identity first. Could you provide your account number, date of birth, and the last 4 digits of your social security number?
My account number is 987321. My date of birth is April 21st, 1983.
And the last 4 digits of your social security number?
Oh, right. 8932.
Thanks. I see a recent $5,000 transaction at Pets 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 on July 24th, 2024, and a $124.24 transaction at Mid-Street Shoes on July 22nd, 2024. Is either incorrect?
Yeah, I don't recognize the Pets Pets Pets.
Please hold while I check on this. I've initiated a dispute for that charge. You'll be notified of the progress. Anything else I can help with?
How long will this take?
The process typically takes up to 30 days. You'll receive regular updates via email.
Okay, thanks.
This seamless finance, travel, retail, insurance companion autonomously accesses back-end systems and requests human assistance when needed. Generative Agent solves like a human, scales like software. Schedule a demo with our sales team or click the link to watch a product launch video.
It's very inspiring to me.
It's very
I
telling
think
too.
there's a lot you can see in how we
There's a lot of interaction that occurs there, a lot of real-time interaction, which is, I think, the best point for it to highlight.
Yeah, and I think, sorry about the delay. We have some issues here with my connection, but I do want to call out, like we both mentioned, using AI to go from agent assistance into full automation. I think Chance has a really good view on the opportunity here.
Yeah, so as we've looked past, we've leveraged generative AI for assisting our agents, right? Things like next best action, doing some summarization for them, maybe through the the chat platform, as it were. But what we're really understanding now is through interaction automation is where most of our clients are turning to, because it actually has a higher impact, not only on their ability to deliver exceptional service, but also to decrease the weight that we put on our agents in order to get through call volume, right? And so as we look at where we are today with automated, with assisted versus unassisted, the trend over the next couple of years is going to be for those to put or automate more interactions within their self-service channels. So when we look at some of those components, things around being able to deliver within IVR, right? So contain within the IVR, keeping the customer happy with the channel they chose to interact with, and allowing them to finish their transaction within that IVR or within the channel itself is going to be a large contributor to CX. It's also, as you increase containment, it's also obviously going to decrease what's going to your agents itself, which by its own virtue creates capacity where you didn't have capacity before. If you think about every time your call volume increases or you're moving through seasonal volumes, you have to increase the number of agents that you have on the phone. One agent trained is one call handled, where one generative agent trained is many call handles. So again, being able to combat your everyday attrition that you have, or even unexpected volumes that come in through the interaction, through automation of the interaction itself. So, and as we move through those pieces, the biggest amount of it is again, what we're creating for the customer, which is ultimately an improved experience from what they have today. So Nick, as we understand some of the benefits that are coming through and how we can leverage them, I think it's best if we talk a little bit about how people understand or should understand how a generative agent works.
Yeah, I think, sorry, there's a question here. I'll answer really quickly. It can handle both voice and chat. And then I also see a question around based on an LLM model. It's based on various LLM models, so it's part of our orchestration. But just to get back to where we were talking about earlier, I think I like the way that you frame it as you're training the generative agent, and that's part of the scaling. And so when you think about it, at its core, it's a reasoning engine that can make decisions autonomously. And for me, that always means is I think of like with great power comes great responsibility. right? So if you think of a deterministic system, when you do or say X, Y is always going to happen, but it requires you to build these flows. What's powerful about a generative AI agent, you can kind of set tasks with a broad goal or objective, instead of telling it every step it needs to do. The flip side of it is, in order to make it really powerful, you have to give it access to systems. And so you need to have really robust guardrails, right? That's the responsibility part. And so when we look at it, there's the intrinsic knowledge, and that's the knowledge that you get from the foundational LLM or LLMs that we are using, right? But you also don't want it to have all that knowledge and apply it to your business. You might think it might have been on the internet and read something like the customer is always right, and that's not what you want your chatbot to necessarily think. So then you substitute that knowledge with your knowledge base and policies and procedures, and that's the same kind of stuff that Chance mentioned that you would use to train your agent. It's the same documentation, even the customer facing FAQ. That's going to help limit its knowledge. Similarly, you're giving it high level task instructions, right? So you're not writing a full flow, but you're saying, when an agent is requesting, or when a customer has this problem, here are the tools that you should use. And so you're giving it that grounding. And then the final system that we think about is, how do you give it access to APIs or backend systems? And that's really useful, right? How do you make generative agent be able to personalize the conversation for a customer if it doesn't have customers' personal information? How is it able to help the customer change their order if it doesn't have access to that system? And so that's really all of those things, the intrinsic knowledge it has from its LLM foundations, the task instructions, and the knowledge base that you have and create, and your existing APIs really give it the universe of being, able to complete the tasks of most tier 1 agents.
That's pretty awesome to go through and understand that basically to set up a generative agent, it's using the same information you'd give to a new hire, right? So same articles, same procedures, access to information. Instead of giving them CRM access, they have an API access to get data. But unlike a live agent, because you're using multiple LLMs, there's also a critic agent that's built into the model that is fact checking the output. So we're ensured, I wouldn't say more consistent, but we're ensured that the information is accurate that's going out to the customer, right? Where in a live agent, you can catch that maybe mid-conversation, or you might be able to catch that, through monitoring. So there are a lot of pieces that are built in here that make it functional and allow it to reason and then check itself. And then the other part around security, about not having all your information out there, because you're really segmented off, right, with where that information lives and how that information is used just within your enterprise. Yep. So let's look at some of the opportunities, right, to implement the generative agent. One of them exists within our IVR technology. So as Nick mentioned earlier, we had a question about where can we use generative agents at? You can use them in chat. You can also use them in IVR. And a lot of folks understand the deterministic flows of an IVR, where we've said, here's what you're going to do. These are all the scenarios that could possibly happen. And as long as you're 0-1 checking the boxes, you're going to go through this flow. So if we bring in generative agent within the IVR, you actually can place that generative agent right behind an existing deterministic flow that would catch things that would go to your agent. And that's what creates the containment, improved containment for your IVR. And so when you look at that, and those specific areas that you can have the agent handle, you begin to understand, again, the containment itself, creating a better experience for your customer, because they don't have to be, bounced around from agent to agent. But we also have the ability, as Nick mentioned, to interact with a live agent if necessary through the generative agent, or be able to pick up tier 1 and even tier 2 type conversations through the generative agent itself. One of the things we also talk about too is that you don't have to be in a cloud environment for you to leverage generative agent. We can also apply generative agent in an on-prem environment. And that ability allows, again, for everyone to really take advantage of this technology today versus waiting for the next release or waiting to convert and move over. But there's true opportunity within the IVR to embed the generative agent. And if I didn't call it out directly, I'll do it again. We're not putting it up front to answer the phone. We're strategically placing it where it can pick up the most intents and can be monitored while it's delivering those intents. So now that we kind of understand where the opportunity is, at least within IVR and chat, to look at generative agent, some of our early adopters, they've started seeing some 30+% containment when it comes to the intents that we have placed a generative agent to handle. We're also seeing, higher than 10% first contact resolution with some of those earlier adopters as well. But, Nick, I think there are some additional benefits that people are seeing today. Do you have any additional advice or information on those?
Yeah, I think we've seen these results. They're still early days, right? So actually, a previous iteration of this had much lower numbers, and that we're getting more and more. We've seen in some intense first contact resolutions like increase more than 15 percentage points. So I think that's one of the things you can actually continue to eke out more gains out of it.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit how you get started, right? And so, as we look at the delivery components for this, successful implementation requires experience and expertise. And one of the reasons why we are partnered with ASAPP PTP is because we have the expertise in contact center space that complements the expertise that ASAPP has within the generative AI space. And so understanding your initial setup, what are the business outcomes you're trying to deliver? How are they going to benefit the business and the customer, and ultimately derive what use cases need to be delivered? And then as you bring those use cases online, with generative agent, it's very much iterative in the same way that you would deal with live agents, by where you train them, you put them on the floor, and then you constantly coach them, right? Which is known as tuning. You're adding more information, for some procedures change within that particular intent. And so you're able to do that in an iterative session with the generative agent while you're identifying the new use cases that you can have the generative agent handle, and then continue to iterate on those use cases and refining them and making them more intuitive for your contact center. And so there are a lot of pieces that are handled here, and that's why when we talk about getting started, is understanding the beginning, and then also how you're going to manage the iteration and evolution of the generative agent within the environment. So let's break this down just a little bit smaller. So when we look at a phased approach, which is what I like to personally use with my clients, when we look at phase one, we identify some of the use cases, again, through your business outcomes, and understand really what we could do simplistically so that everyone is comfortable within the organization leveraging a generative AI, right? And so we are able to, as we talked about, implement and iterate and improve on that and monitor it until we identify the next use cases that come in, or that we should be applied. So we can either expand on those use cases to take slightly more complicated elements of them, or we can bring in new adjacent use cases. And it's the same process of training, understanding, implementing, monitoring, and then refining as we go through. Slightly more advanced is when we start adding in the human in the loop components of it. And Nick mentioned this earlier on, that we have the ability to contact live agents through the generative agent. So we are able to put in parameters that allow the generative agent to understand if it needs help from a live agent for a procedure that might be missing, or data that's not available, or it needs to get an approval for someone. It also has the ability to understand if the customer wants to move directly to an agent, or if it's beyond the scope of what it's given, it will find the appropriate agent and deliver that customer to that live rep. So one of the things I want to focus in on at this point is the human in the loop view. So as agents are, again, live agents are able to interact with the generative agent is keeping that customer in the conversation. So it's important to understand is that when the generative agent is reaching out to a human, it is not disconnecting with that customer. It is keeping the conversation alive with them, but it's presenting to the agent the elements of the conversation so that the agent can understand what the conversation was, what is it I'm looking for, here are my thoughts, this is where I'm going, and then what do I need to do? And then there's a pane in which we can allow that agent to then interact with the generative agent and either provide it with the procedure it needs to review and use, or give it the data or indicate that the data has been updated, or even simply just approve the transaction that they're looking for. And so all of this is built in the human in the loop agent view. This is a very unique view. When people talk about human in the loop in the industry, they talk about providing feedback to the model and doing some tuning on the model overall. Really, we look at the human in the loop being able to drive that interaction is a very unique component. And it helps to improve not only the live agent ability within the service center, but also the ability for the generative agent to continue fluid with the customers. Okay. So as we look here, we've talked about a total of things happening within generative agent. We understand some of the reasoning. We understand that it can provide outputs. We understand those outputs are being checked. We have some use cases that are going in. And we've talked a little bit about human in the loop. So what I'd like to do is show you a quick snippet of a video of where we're showing some of those mechanics in play. This one is specific for an airline, but you can apply this to really any financial, healthcare, hospitality. If the mechanics are pretty much the same.
Meet Chelsea. Chelsea's flight has been canceled due to a weather event. She has been offered a seat on a flight tomorrow, but that will be too late. So she calls the airline's customer service number. Here's Chelsea's experience if she were to call a typical contact center.
All agents are currently busy. You are the 65th customer in line, and your current wait time is 25 minutes. Please stay on the line. Your call is very important to us.
Luckily, Chelsea meets Generative Agent when she calls. Because it scales to meet demand, Generative Agent answers right away.
Hello, and thank you for calling 5-Star Airlines. I'm Orville, an AI agent. How can I help you today?
My 2:45 flight to Chicago is just canceled. I am presenting at a conference tomorrow, so I really need to get there before tomorrow morning. Is there another flight I could get on this evening?
Generative Agent identifies the customer's intent and checks available flights from her location to Chicago.
One of our regional partners has a flight at 6:30 this evening. It would get you to Chicago at 9:49 tonight. Would that work?
That's perfect. Let's book it.
After checking the customer's profile, Generative Agent sees that no available economy seats in the new flight match her preference.
I can book that flight for you, but there are no available aisle seats in economy. An aisle seat is available in business class. The fee to upgrade is $75.
Yeah, I definitely want to upgrade. But can I use miles for that?
Because this flight is with a partner airline, I will need to check to see if we can use your miles for the upgrade. Hold just a moment while I check.
Generative Agent works with a human in the loop and can ask for guidance when it gets stuck or request authorization for actions that require a human decision maker by policy. In this case, it explains the situation and asks if the supervisor will authorize using miles for the upgrade.
Thank you for your patience. Yes, we can upgrade your seat for 4,000 miles. Would you like to use your miles for this upgrade?
That would be great.
Your new flight is booked. Your seat upgrade using 4,000 miles is confirmed. Your new seat assignment is 8C.
Generative Agent determines that the Flight Miles credit card offer has a high probability of success with Chelsea.
I've noticed that you have used miles for several upgrades recently. With our Flight Miles credit card, you could earn miles on your everyday purchases, and right now, we have a promotion that will double your miles earned for the first 3 months. Would you like to apply?
Sure, let's do that. The miles always come in handy.
Contact centers with Generative Agent have no wait time. It will act to rebook the customer's flight, offer and confirm the seat upgrade, get approval from a human supervisor when required by policy or when it gets stuck, and complete a credit card application for the customer. If Chelsea got a typical contact center, she would still be on the line.
Your current wait time is 24 minutes. Please stay on the line. Your call is very important to us.
Expand your contact center's capacity and cut your cost to serve. Staff your contact center with Generative Agent.
Hey, welcome back, Nick.
Yeah, sorry about that. Technical difficulties always come at the worst moments, and this was one of those. I appreciate Chance covering some of the topics that I was planning to cover.
That's okay. So as we wrapped up, we went through the video with airline booking that's demonstrating the human in the loop component and the increase in capacity. So there's a number of pieces in here that are very telling. Again, fluid conversation with the customer. One, two, the ability to know and to check for information and reach out for that. And then for the live agents to provide that information. I think the other big piece around this is that, it scales, right? So, we talked a little bit at the beginning, training one agent is one call, training one generative agent is many calls. But here, really, when you think about the length of time you spend on hold waiting for an agent, where a generative agent could have already picked you up and helped you, is a huge benefit to customer experience. Nick?
Yeah, I agree. I love part of this video because it shows that at the end, that's an element that isn't always highlighted, right? That it's not just sending you to generative agent when you would have gone to a live agent. It's actually taking advantage of that dead call time or call wait time that you would have had otherwise as a customer. Which is really one of the things when we talk about earlier, where I cut out the customer satisfaction metrics. One of the things we hear a lot is like, you can do all the bells and whistles, but actually what matters like most is, did you resolve the problem and did you do it quickly? And those are the biggest drivers of customer satisfaction.
Yep. Exactly.
So that's what I love about how all this works.
So I know we have a little bit of feedback from customers, so let's talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have Generative Agent live with a couple of customers. Some of the examples we have are in airlines, because that's one of the customers we have. I pull out this quote because it aligns to what we were saying earlier about the customer really wants to get the job done as fast as possible. And so there's what's the back end work that you need to do to get that. And that's some of the implementation stuff that you talked about, Chance, of like making sure we know what intents are high ROI, and how do we fine tune those. We'll add a link to this video, a longer video from Shelly from JetBlue, and there's other things that I think she really brought up that are really powerful. Right? And so there's no real right time to get started. So it's really about finding the right use case in the right area, and getting comfortable from that. I'm paraphrasing, but that really is our kind of like our phase in. So it's really important to have customers who understand this and see this value.
Right, and willing to take the walk with us, right? And I think that's the other part too, is that there's there's a lot of things with generative agent that move quicker than traditional development, right? So the implementation run could feel more compressed, but there are also some things from traditional deployments that don't necessarily apply to generative agent. And so having business partners and technical partners on the client side willing to understand and learn from us is also a huge benefit. And I think a lot of what Shelly got, understanding some of her comments and seeing some of her feedback, is really around that partnership between us and between them in order to get them where they needed to be, so that we can start implementing with generative agent.
Yeah, and there's a question here around a pilot. I actually think it aligns really well to this partnership thing, because we flex and how we do it. Obviously, we'd like you to get started as soon as possible with production. But we've done different proofs of concepts. We like to do bake-offs when that makes sense. We want whatever company who's going to work with us and move with us lockstep to be comfortable that they've made the right choice, and we have the confidence that we are the right choice. So we have different companies that have structured, paid pilots or unpaid pilots with success criteria, and then it becomes like, we become a year or 2 year long contract. So we will be flexible to show that one, we're good partners, and also to show you, how generative agent can really work. It makes it much more powerful when it actually has the integration into your backend systems and into your knowledge base versus what you might see in a demo.
And that's a good point too. And most of the pilots that we set up and the ones we envision, or we call them points of value for a client, we look at them less as pilots and more of kind of the initial phase of deployment, because once they see the results from pilot, we obviously scale. But the beautiful part of doing a pilot is that you can also bring up pieces of the flow. So in IVR, I might divert like 1 out of every 10 calls into a generative agent, so that that pilot can then allow people to understand how it's interacting and moving and feel more comfortable. And as that level of comfort increases, we can slowly ratchet up, which moves you from pilot to production fairly quick, right? It's piloting additional use cases where you get a little bit of a slowdown, but overall the delivery is a bit quicker with the generative agent because there's not as much work that needs to be done up front. It's more about tuning at that point and getting people familiar with the generative agent itself. All right, I think we're towards the end now. So as we've reviewed all the way through our agenda, understanding generative agent, what automation versus augmentation or assistance, the benefits of those, the benefits of using generative agent, and then the application of generative agent and human in the loop. I think we've covered everything on our agenda today.
Yeah, we've covered, I think, everything we could in a general way. I think go to this QR code and really get in touch with someone from our solution engineering and account executives. They can give you much more detail on how it reflects to your specific use cases. And as I mentioned, we'll also have links to some other good videos and collateral that will help give you a better sense of how you can make it work for your use cases.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for your time, Chance, and thanks for those who are watching.